FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
And welcome. You're listening to the Financial Survival Network. I am Kerry Lutz. Day before Thanksgiving, getting ready for the celebration. Got family coming in from all over the place, which is great. So light schedule the next few days. I feel a little guilty, but I guess I'll get over it. And you're wondering about what's going to happen in the future? Well, new book coming out that you really should take a look at, entitled We Have Seen the Future and It Looks Like Baltimore. The author is the redoubtable Lowell Ponte. Lowell, you've done so much throughout your career. I mean, books, editor at Reader's Digest, and radio personality as well. And that makes us really thrilled to have you back on.
Well, it's wonderful to be had, Kerry. Thanks so much for inviting me. Yes, the essence of this book is that America is now enmeshed and has been for 100 years in what we call dream wars. The war between the American dream of small government, individualism, low taxes, you get to keep what you earn, meritocracy, versus a very alien philosophy that is not really American or even liberal, and that is progressivism. So the American dream versus the utopian collectivist progressive dream, which holds that you don't even exist as an individual, you exist only as members of groups based on your race, your ethnicity, your religion, what have you, and certainly your ideology or gender, depending on which of the 26 valid sexes or sex preferences you may now belong to. But you don't exist as an individual. What matters is the collective to progressives like Hillary Clinton, like socialist Bernie Sanders, like President Barack Obama.
It takes a village, right?
The village, yeah. The village is all that matters. The individual can be sacrificed to the village, or as the notorious Woodrow Wilson, the first Democrat progressive president more than 100 years ago, put it, the Constitution is a bad thing because it interferes with the ability of government to do all the wonderful things we want government to do. And to progressives, after all, government has replaced God. Science has replaced religion. We are to bow down to those things based on authority. And except for a small ruling elite of Michael Bloombergs who will tell you how large a soft drink you're allowed to drink, and other national nanny statists, apart from them, you and I are the serfs. Or as Woodrow Wilson put it, when they tear down the old, obsolete superstructure of the Constitution, what will replace it will be a beautiful, shining structure they are building secretly inside the Constitution now. And that structure, said President Wilson, is like a perfect beehive. So if you want to be a beehive with a few queens like Hillary running things, we're headed in the right direction. If you believe in the America of our founders, where people were supposed to be big and government was supposed to be small, not the other way around, where we are individuals uniquely created and blessed by God and so on, where we are not led by a narrow elite of people who believe themselves highly superior to the rest of us, but we each are allowed to build our own pyramid. We're not forced to spend our lives building a pyramid to the honor of a Barack Obama or a Hillary Clinton, like so many slaves. If you believe in that, you're the person we wrote this book for. We use Baltimore in the book as one battlefield in that war, where you'll remember last April people were mobilized against the police, and where the progressives have run Baltimore for more than 60 years. And so the city fathers and mothers simply ordered the police to stand down. In fact, the mayor of Baltimore, as her city was burning, said, "We also gave those who wish to destroy space to do that as well." And we work very hard to keep that balance. Well, that's the America we're turning into, a place where half the people will not have jobs at all. We already have 49.5% of households in America in which somebody is getting some kind of government welfare-like benefit, in which future elections will just be bidding wars to see who offers the most, in which half the population will not bother working at all. Indeed, in America today, we have 1 out of 5 working-age males who don't work at all. We have 94 million Americans who have gone looking for full-time employment and not been able to find it. This is the worst proportion of people people actually working in the society since Jimmy Carter was president back in 1977. So the economy is not good. The one thing the government has done, of course, is zero interest rate policy, which under the Fed means that if you are a government or you are a giant corporation, you can get money essentially for nothing. And the giant corporations have used that free loan money to buy back their own stock, which makes them look like we have prosperity. But in fact, productivity has been falling. The only thing we've been producing for is to build inventory. Jobs are being created, but they're almost all hamburger flipper jobs. 1 out of 3 young women still live at home in the millennial generation with mom and dad up to age 34, and young men are scarcely better. In other words, we have a society that is spiraling down. And while they play a lot of economic games and other games to make it look like things are better than that, in fact, there's really very little economic growth. I mean, think about it. We've dumped nearly $8 trillion of stimulus money into the economy. If John Maynard Keynes had been right about stimulus and the multiplier effect of government spending, we should all be making at least $250,000 a year now with all that money poured into the economy. Instead, we're barely limping by at less than 2% real economic growth. So if that's what you can buy for $8 trillion, imagine what would happen if that ever declined. Imagine what would happen if the government actually had to borrow money, as it now runs on, at real interest rates, the historic average being between 5 and 6% instead of 0. I mean, every time you raise interest rates, the government would have to pay by another 1 point. You're increasing debt payment by between $500 billion and $1 trillion a year. So if interest rates were to return to normal, if the Fed did allow interest rates to rise to make a normal market, you would have hell on a half shell. The government would have no prayer of paying what it would cost. In addition, we have things like Social Security also spiraling down. Social Security now incurs, $5 trillion of additional unfunded liability every year in an economy where the whole government budget is only about $4 trillion. So you can imagine what the future is going to look like if we continue on this path. The objective in our showing how to protect yourself from this war between the American dream and the progressive dream that has led to this chaos and horror. Our goal is just to help people protect themselves so they know how to withstand it, to at least shield their own family, to give our republic some hope of coming back here. It's going to be a very interesting election coming up, therefore.
Yeah, what's your thoughts now? I know you were very negative on the Donald a few months back. Has anything occurred to make you change that opinion at all?
Well, the American people, if we believe in anything about democracy, the American people like somebody who talks back to the establishment. They want someone who can't be easily bought or sold. We still don't really know who or what Donald Trump is, but we know he's a lot better than the establishment candidates like Jeb Bush, who stand to just give us more of the same. Meanwhile, we may be tap dancing on the line into World War III as we speak. I mean, the Turks have just shot down a Russian a Russian military jet. Russia lost an airliner in the Sinai just a few days ago with more than 200 ordinary people on board. Russia had a helicopter that went to rescue the pilots of the jet, shot down as well. I mean, things are, shall we say, tense when you have a Vladimir Putin who governs as a czar, but his czardom is based on his appearing to be a strong man, a power, someone who knows how to throw his weight and muscle around. Well, if he can't make a meaningful response to these attacks on Russian aircraft, a lot of his credibility is going to wane in Russia, and I don't think they want that to happen. So it'll be interesting to see all the hundreds of chess moves that could result from the events of recent days. Meanwhile, we have our own president who has set a standard for weakness I think never before seen in American history.
Yeah.
A president who is just perfectly happy to stand back and be pushed around by any amount of force. And we're seeing the implications in Europe now of their equivalent of what we call the Obama-mander here. I mean, we've long known that you can rig an election by redrawing the district boundaries for congressmen or other lawmakers, and that's called a gerrymander, from Governor Elbridge Gerry in Massachusetts. Long ago, 2 centuries ago. But now we have a president who's done the most audacious thing in history. He's actually redrawn the entire boundary of the southern boundary of the U.S. to include all of Mexico and half of Central America. And simply bringing those people here en masse to create a new voter base for the Democratic Party, because America never had a thing that radical leftists and progressives like himself felt was essential to winning a Marxist class war, and that is a proletariat, a large, disaffected working class that can be turned into a political army. That's never been able to grow in American soil, because when you have workers who voluntarily come to the U.S., up until now, historically, they always said, I don't want to overthrow the rich, I want to become one of them.
Right.
Well, people like that are not very good for class warfare of the kind Obama wants to wage. So, therefore, what do we see? Well, we see he's had to import a proletariat. That's what bringing in all these Latin Americans is all about. And now Europe is hoisted by its own petard from having brought in all these Turkish and Arabic braceros into their culture. We now see that they're highly centralized society, that they're a society of people who have been largely infantilized so that government could be paternalistic and play the father to us all. People have been made deliberately dependent on government. Well, when you have a society of children, and then you begin hitting that society with terrorism and with massive drains on its resources, as is now happening with this huge influx of refugees, all because Germany has found its own reproduction rate, its own fertility rate, having just fallen below that of Japan. The European countries desperately need new blood, and that new blood basically is coming from the Muslim world. And when we ask Saudi Arabia, you have all this land and you already speak Arabic, wouldn't you rather take in people from places like Syria and North Africa? The Saudis said, not on your life. We're not going to take in any of those people, but we will help. The Saudis volunteered to pay the cost of building an additional 200 new mosques across Europe for Islamic worship. So with that, basically, you're going to see Islam. I mean, we talked for a long time about Europe turning into Eurabia. It now really is happening. And with the cooperation of people like German Chancellor Angela Merkel.
Yeah, it's remarkable.
So it's surreal. We're seeing a major transformation of the planet before our eyes, and we're seeing the potential start of World War III, and we're seeing the economy not improving at all. In fact, if anything, getting much worse under this additional welfare burden. The only way the government can cover that ultimately is just by printing more money or by making free money available through an ongoing zero interest rate. So don't expect interest rates to rise much anytime soon. At most, they're going to give you, a token eighth or quarter of a % interest rate, maybe 250 basis points. And when you do that, that's not really an improvement. They were operating in that range anyway.
Right.
So it's all an attempt to keep free money flowing, to keep the stock market casino operating and the party going. But the party is getting rather late. And people are already starting to sing Old Lang Syne for the culture of the West. That's why we wrote this book. We have seen the future, and it looks like Baltimore, American Dream versus Progressive Dream. Oh, by the way, Kerry, your listeners can get an absolutely free and postpaid copy of this new 252-page book. And all they need to do is call a toll-free number to get it. We'll pay the shipping and everything. A great holiday gift or stocking stuffer for people you know who are concerned about their money and the future of their children. To get the book free, just call 800-630-1494. That's 1-800-630-1494. Or as I like to say, think of Columbus sailing the ocean blue in 1492, but not quite. 1-800-630-1494 for the free book.
All right, Lowell, you always have interesting things to say, interesting observations. Is there any hope for the West and the world in general?
Well, when we say the future looks like Baltimore obviously has problems. For example, since the riots last April, murders have gone up by 54%. They've had more than 300 murders now this year in Baltimore as the police have been ordered to stand back, and the police are no longer doing proactive policing. The murders are up 54%. Arrests are down by 30%. Crime is taking over the city. Baltimore has become the heroin capital of the United States. 1 out of 10 people in that once beautiful city, that once highly advanced city that in the early 1800s was the Silicon Valley of the United States, the highest tech city we had. They now have 1 out of 10 people there who are heroin addicts.
Wow.
This is not great for the future, but there still is hope. For example, last summer, we turned on our television, and what did we see that reminded us of American greatness? There was a U.S. spacecraft flying past the planet Pluto and sending back images of that giant heart-shaped Valentine from the cosmos to humans on the surface of the planet. And we were all astonished, and the spacecraft worked perfectly. And we said, this must be being controlled from the Kennedy Space Center, or from the center at Houston, or from the Jet Propulsion Lab. No, that was being sent back from the facility that built it, which was the Advanced Physics Lab at Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore.
Mm-hmm.
That was a Baltimore-controlled, Baltimore-built spacecraft that we were watching, though very few people were reminded of that. There's also, on the Democrat side, they still have Martin O'Malley as candidate number 3. Candidate number 3 used to be the mayor of Baltimore, used to be the governor of Maryland, a man so far to the left that he actually imposed a law saying the government owns the rainwater that falls on your roof and driveway.
Yeah.
A man so crazy that he actually imposed a special tax on millionaires in Maryland and promptly saw thousands of them leave the state
Shock.
rather than pay that tax. So the government actually lost more money than it made from taxing millionaires. But this is the old Barack Obama, even if I'm losing tax revenue, he once said in an ABC debate, I would rather tax rich people in the interest of fairness.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's progressivism for you. Kill the productive and in order to reward the unproductive. That's how societies commit suicide in the long run. We have that, and we also have another thing from Johns Hopkins, and that is the great hospital, arguably one of the best hospitals in the world.
True.
Based in Baltimore, where a young neurosurgeon became the most famous and successful neurosurgeon on the planet. His name was Ben Carson.
Yeah, that is true.
And that, too, came from Baltimore. So Baltimore could have a very bright future or a very dire future, depending on whether progressivism continues to run the city that gave us, among others, Nancy Pelosi. Nancy Pelosi's dad was mayor of Baltimore.
Mayor, right.
When she was 8 years old, her mayor father would put her on the phone to shake people down and say to them, at age 8, she's saying this, things like, you want that building permit? Well, here's what you have to do for us. It was a Democrat boss thug city, and in many ways it still is. It's 90% Democrat run. And unless they can cure themselves of that, there is no real positive future for Baltimore. If they can cure themselves of that and go back to the greatness the city once had, then its future and ours could be very bright. But that's what the next few elections are going to determine for America.
Well, we can only hope. Well, thanks for coming on as always, and keep your fingers crossed.
Yeah, it is a time for crossing fingers and fingering crosses, as a friend of mine used to say. And if you'd like to get the absolutely free book, just call 800-630-1494. We'll pay the shipping and everything. 1-800-630-1494. Kerry, God bless you this Thanksgiving and holiday season.
Yeah, you too there, Lowell. Always a pleasure. Thanks so much for being on.
Be well.
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.